Hi guys, I'm Sam, I'm your cat's nutritionist and most importantly, independent. I'm not sponsored by any pet food company. I do not get a kickback for praising or slating anything. And that's really rare in this industry because a lot of the content you see online, even articles that seem scientific, are quietly funded by pet food brands. And when you peel back the label, you'll see the same few corporations writing the rules, funding the studies, and supplying the talking points. So today, I'm giving you my unfiltered list of the worst dry cat foods on the market, the ones I would never feed to my cat. If you disagree, that's absolutely fine. You are welcome to feed these to your cat, but I won't. Now, before we start, let me clear up a common argument that's probably going to appear in the comments. The argument goes something like, it doesn't really matter what the ingredients are, what matters is the nutrients and the calcium to phosphorus ratio, or whatever other talking point they want you to believe. But here's the problem with that thinking. Nutrients come from ingredients, not the other way around. You cannot build a healthy diet just by hitting numbers on a spreadsheet or by adhering to some subpar standard like AFCO or FEDIAF. These ultra-processed dry foods often use meat that has been cooked at extremely high temperatures, stripping away its natural nutrition. So manufacturers pump up the food with synthetic vitamins and minerals to meet the required levels. It's a bit like burning your steak to ash and sprinkling a multivitamin on top. So that's not nutrition, that's damage control. We're not talking about that. Now, let me, before we start, do a bit of a science check with you for context. Let me explain two things that matter way more than just protein percentage on the label, for example. The first one is PDCAAS, and that's the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score. Now, bear with me here. It basically tells us how usable and complete a protein source is. For example, Purina likes to say that wheat gluten is used in pet food because it has all the right amino acids and because it's rich in protein. However, if you look at this ratio and you know what you're talking about, like myself, you'll see that wheat protein scores just 0.42, meaning that less than half of it is useful to your cat. That's why wheat gluten is so prevalent in cat food, because you need a lot just to get a tiny bit of protein. Real meat, that's close to 1, and that's what we want to strive for. That's what your cat's body actually needs. The second thing no one really talks about is called TEF, and that's the thermic effect of food. Protein also burns more energy to digest. This means that for each 100 grams of pure meat, your cat will net out between 70 and 80 of those. So protein burns a lot whenever they are digesting it. This helps your cat maintain lean muscle, a healthy metabolism, and feel fuller for longer because protein is so satiating. Carbs do not do that. So when a dry food is packed with cereal grains, cheap meat meals or animal derivatives or even sugars, it's not just poor quality, it's biologically inappropriate. So with that in mind, let's get straight into it. The first food I do not like is this Purina Pro Plan Complete Essentials. And anytime you see chicken and rice and you see rice appear on a cat food, does that not trigger alarm bells? The first ingredient is chicken, which is great. We always want chicken to be the first ingredient in a carnivore's diet, in a carnivore's food. However, the second ingredient here is rice. And then we have corn gluten meal. And those are not appropriate ingredients for a cat. We then have poultry byproduct meal, etc., etc. The crude protein is 36%, but a lot of that protein is going to come from corn gluten meal, not from fresh chicken, not from fresh beef, not from fresh sardines or tuna or whatever. It's going to come from corn gluten meal, which is a very, very cheap source of protein that is biologically inappropriate for a cat. So if you want to feed this food, that's absolutely fine. But this is a food that would go against a cat's nature because cats in the wild aren't really going to eat rice or corn gluten meal. Plus, poultry byproduct meals is very, very unspecific. Which bird it is precisely. Is it chicken? Just put chicken. Is it turkey? Put turkey. The second one is the blue buffalo, and this is the with chicken. Anytime I see with chicken, with beef, with whatever, my spidey sense goes out, and I'm like, why does it say with chicken and not chicken? But if you look at the ingredients, deboned chicken is the first ingredient, which is great. We want to see deboned chicken as the first ingredient. Second ingredient is chicken meal, which is a lower quality protein than deboned chicken. That's why it comes in second place. And then we again have pea protein, peas, and tapioca starch. Now, the problem I have with this food, it's not so much that this food is not very good. This food is acceptable. However, I do not like whenever companies put pea protein instead of adding more chicken to the recipe whilst charging you a premium. So by no means this would be a bad food or dismal food or anything like that. However, you want to be paying for meat sources. You want to be paying for protein coming from meat sources, which is what costs money. As I always say, you want to be paying for meat in the supermarket whenever you take your significant other on a date, and you want to be paying for meat in pet food as well. Let's look at temptations or dreamies here in the UK. First ingredient is chicken byproduct meal. Remember Blue Buffalo that says deboned chicken? That's good. Chicken byproduct meal is a much lower quality protein and a much lower quality ingredient. We then have wheat, we then have ground whole grain corn, soybean meal, brewer's rice, and animal fat. We then have meat and bone meal and natural flavors and corn gluten meal. And now if you think that any of these ingredients are biologically appropriate and you want to get fixated on the formula or whatever, that's fine. But in my opinion, ground whole grain corn and soybean meal aren't things that are biologically appropriate for a carnivore, which is your cat and my cat. So personally, I would stay away from this one. Let's look at Hills, and this is the adult chicken recipe. Now the first ingredient is chicken, which is great. We always want to see the first ingredient as chicken. We then have whole grain wheat, which again is protein deficient. The PDCAAS is 0.42, which is not very good. The absorbability isn't going to be very good. The thermic effect of food is not going to be very good. So it potentially is going to give your cat a lot of calories, but not enough nourishment. We then have corn protein meal, and once again, you want to be paying for meat coming from animal sources, not corn, because corn protein meal is a lot cheaper than real beef or real chicken, and that's something that you want to look out for. We then have whole grain corn, etc. So this, in my opinion, doesn't command the price that it should be. This is not a premium food by any stretch of the imagination. Wheat, corn protein meal, and whole grain corn are ingredients that should never touch a cat. The same with Hill's food sensitivities. I mean, if your cat has a sensitivity, the first ingredient you give your carnivore cannot be brewer's rice. It simply can't be. It's not biologically appropriate. And then we have hydrolyzed chicken liver. Hydrolyzation is the process of breaking down molecules with water so that the body can absorb them better. We then have rice protein concentrate, soybean oil, chicken liver flavor, and things like ground pecan shells. So this is a literal concoction. This is a lab concoction that is meant to keep your cat surviving, that is meant to keep your cat ticking. This isn't going to solve any problems at all. It's deficient in protein, it's very high in carbohydrates, and it's an absolute train wreck in my opinion. Brewer's rice, the first ingredient, absolutely not. Rice protein concentrate, etc. Not a food that's biologically appropriate. Let's look at Royal Canin, and Royal Canin actually have produced science, so-called science, that actually questions whether cats are actual carnivores or not, which is basic biology, by the way. If you do not think that cats are obligate carnivores, then we have a fundamental disagreement. And so they have produced science and they have not disclosed that the guy that wrote the paper works for Royal Canin, and they question a lot of carbohydrates in pet food, and they say that those carbohydrates aren't damaging to cats. And I, for the life of me, cannot see why a company would do that unless it was a financial decision. Because as you can see here, brewer's rice is a lot cheaper than chicken, and hydrolyzed soy protein is a lot cheaper than beef. And so brewer's rice, hydrolyzed soy protein is actually not a bad source of protein. It's rich in leucine. The problem is that this is a vegan protein, and that vegan protein being fed to a carnivore, even by means of hydrolyzation, is not biologically appropriate. We then have chicken fat, which is okay, and then powdered cellulose, which will add a bit of fiber. They don't put rabbit ears or they don't put any biological fiber in there. They just want to put powdered cellulose, which once again is not appropriate for cats. They then put like salt and vegetable oil, and I just don't like it. The crude protein is 24%, which is extremely deficient. The crude fat is 18%, and that's okay. But those fats, where are those fats coming from? From the chicken? And from what? From the vegetable oil, maybe? Those are unhealthy fats. The chicken fat, yes, that's going to be healthy. That's going to help your cat's metabolism. But brewer's rice, hydrolyzed soy protein, powdered cellulose, I don't think this food is very good at all. Save your money. Let's look at Purina Cat Chow, and this is the one with chicken and vitamins, dry cat food. Now, the ingredients are chicken byproduct meal, which is once again not very good, not a very good source of first ingredient. Ground yellow corn, that tells you pretty much everything you need to know about this food. Corn protein meal, whole grain wheat, rice, soy flour, etc, etc. Now, if you think that ground yellow corn, corn protein meal, and whole grain wheat are great for carnivores and rice and soy flour, then you knock yourself out and you just feed these foods. And whenever cats have loose stools and chronic IBD and they don't have great teeth and they don't have good overall health, is because you haven't been feeding them in a biologically appropriate manner. You have been feeding them what marketing departments and what a lot of these veterinarians want you to feed them, but not because it's a good food. It's because it's a very, very profitable food. And then we are going to look at something like Friskies, for example. So the first ingredient in this carnivore's food is ground yellow corn. The second one is corn protein meal, and then we have poultry byproduct meal, which we don't know what that is. Turkey, quail, chicken, they reserve the right to change from batch to batch what that protein is and what that bird is. And that's not something I like. If I want to feed my cat chicken, I give him chicken. If I want to feed my cat sardines, I feed him sardines. If I want to feed my cat venison, I do that. However, I will never ever give my cat ground yellow corn in his food. That's absolutely ridiculous. It makes no sense at all. We then have things like meat and bone meal and liver flavor. Not even the actual liver flavor. This, in my opinion, is just dismal. But just for a bit of context, because a lot of people will say, well, you don't like Royal Canin, you don't like a lot of these foods. I'm going to give you a food that I do like, which is Origin. And Origin was bought by Mars, which are the owners of Royal Canin. So this is the same company. This is literally the same company that I loathe in Royal Canin, producing a phenomenal food. If you look at this, do these ingredients resemble a diet of a carnivore? Chicken, turkey, whole herring, turkey giblets, liver, heart, gizzard, salmon, dehydrated chicken, dehydrated turkey, dehydrated salmon, dehydrated chicken liver, dehydrated egg, whole red lentils, pinto beans, red lentils, chicken liver, eggs, chicken fat, natural chicken flavor, whole navy beans. So instead of yellow corn, they are giving you some veg. We then have things like pollock oil, chicken hearts, and things that sound a lot like what your cat and my cat would eat if they caught a rat or if they caught a small mammal, a small prey. They would eat the whole prey. They would eat the tongue, the spleen, the heart, the liver, etc., etc., the kidneys. And so it is incumbent upon you to try to mimic, to try to replicate what your cat would be eating in the wild if they were left to their own devices. And in my opinion, Origin, which is owned by the same company as Royal Canin, is a much better food than Royal Canin. So I am not a hater. I live by the sword and die by the sword. The crude protein in Origin is 40%, which is pretty decent. Another one is the Tiki Cat Bone Carnivore. We have chicken meal, I like it, peas, turkey meal, chickpeas, chicken fat. We then have natural chicken flavor, dried pumpkin, salt, potassium chloride. So it's by no means a perfect food, but the first few ingredients seem to be more meat than anything else. They seem to be much more nutritious and much more appropriate for a cat than yellow ground corn protein meal, and a lot of those nonsensical ingredients. So whenever it comes to certain pet foods, you have to wonder, is this food good or is this food not appropriate for my cat? And by the way, if you want to feed your cat better, you should download our guide, How to Feed Your Cat for Optimum Health. The guide, just like this video, is going to open your eyes to better nutrition for your cat and what's actually biologically appropriate, and some of the things that you should avoid in cat food altogether. The link will be down below. How to feed your cat for optimum health. Now, I want to touch upon whether you should shop cat food according to whether your cat is outdoor, indoor, they have this condition, that condition, or whatever. It is very likely that if you feed your cat a biologically appropriate diet, that a lot of the problems they currently have are going to go away. If you feed your cat a food with rice or yellow ground corn, by putting them on a food that is more chicken based, that is high in protein and low in carbohydrate, you might find that their renal failure, you will find that their allergy will go away. You might find that the diabetes all of a sudden gets a lot better because the insulin is not spiking to the max every time you give the cat a carb heavy meal, and you will see that the cat is simply better. The cat's stools are better, the cat's overall health is better. The cat might get leaner because the cat is not having to cope with huge amounts of carbohydrates, highly refined, hyper palatable carbohydrates, and those cat foods simply are not adequate for a carnivore. And I am sure you love your cat and I love my cat, and for the life of me, I cannot understand why pet food companies will put things like yellow ground corn into a cat food and then tell everyone that their cat food is phenomenal. It simply doesn't compute because they are carnivores, and that is it. It's biology 101, and I don't think you should try to change biology. Now, I actually made a video on the best wet cat foods that you can buy on the market, and I rank them and I try to ascertain whether those are good or bad, and I highly encourage you to watch that video next, which will be here.